For more than 15 centuries, the world has repeated one of the greatest historical falsehoods ever told. They say Rome fell. They tell us that in the year 476 AD, when a barbarian warlord forced the last Western emperor to surrender his crown, the greatest empire the world had ever known simply collapsed into dust and vanished forever. But that is not what happened, because Rome was never merely a city. It was never simply an empire of marble temples, marching legions, and crowned emperors. Rome was something far more dangerous, far more enduring, and far more revolutionary. It was an idea so powerful that even after its armies were shattered, its capital invaded, and its emperors humiliated, it continued reshaping the world long after its supposed death. The Gauls burned Rome to the ground. Hannibal brought it to the edge of annihilation. Civil war tore it apart from within. Germanic tribes overran its borders. And yet every force that tried to destroy Rome made the exact same fatal mistake. They believed they were conquering a nation, when in reality, they were confronting a machine designed to absorb catastrophe and transform it into power. Again and again, Rome did something no civilization before it had ever mastered. It turned defeat into reinvention. It devoured its enemies, stole their strengths, rewrote their customs, and folded them into its own system until even its conquerors began speaking its language, obeying its laws, worshipping under its institutions, and imagining the world through Roman eyes. How did a tiny settlement of farmers on the banks of a muddy Italian river become the blueprint for Western civilization? How did Rome survive its own destruction? And how is it possible that though the empire officially died more than 1500 years ago, nearly every modern nation still lives inside the political architecture Rome created? This is the story of how a single city taught humanity how to rule continents, how to organize power, and how to make itself eternal. To understand Rome, we must travel back long before emperors, before gladiators, before Caesar, before the Colosseum ever cast its shadow over history. In 753 BC, the traditional founding date, a collection of Latin-speaking villages sat on 7 hills above a bend in the Tiber River in central Italy. There was nothing special about them. The soil was decent, but not exceptional. The river was useful, but not the Nile. The location was the middle of a peninsula that the great civilizations of the ancient world barely noticed. But geography had given this location one quiet advantage that would take centuries to reveal itself. The 7 hills sat at the only point north of the sea where the Tiber could easily be crossed. Every trade route moving through the Italian peninsula passed through here. Every army, every merchant. Rome did not conquer Italy because it was powerful. It became powerful because everything in Italy had to pass through Rome first. The city began as a monarchy, a line of 7 kings, half legendary, half historical. The last of them, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, was a tyrant who ruled by terror and whose son committed a crime so monstrous that the Roman aristocracy rose up, drove him out, and made a decision that changed history. Never again would one man hold supreme power over Rome. In 509 BC, they built a republic. The Roman Republic was not a democracy. Power belonged to the Senate, a body of aristocratic families who controlled land, law, and the legions. But it had something more important than equality. It had limits. No single man could hold power for more than 1 year. 2 consuls were elected annually, each able to veto the other. Ambition was permitted, but ambition that reached too far was crushed. For almost 5 centuries, this system held, and it produced a culture built on one idea above everything else: virtue. Not virtue in the soft modern sense. Roman virtue, virtues, was harder than that. It meant courage, discipline, the willingness to sacrifice everything for Rome, not because you were ordered to, but because Rome was more important than your life. Romans told a story about a general named Regulus, captured by Carthage during one of their great wars. The Carthaginians sent him back to Rome on parole to negotiate peace. He arrived, told the Senate to reject every proposal, and then returned to Carthage voluntarily, because he had given his word. The Carthaginians tortured him to death. Romans told that story for generations, not as a tragedy, as an ideal. Then in 390 BC, catastrophe. A Celtic tribe from northern Italy called the Gauls swept south, destroyed a Roman army at the Battle of the Allia, and sacked the city of Rome itself. They burned it, looted it. The city paid a ransom in gold to make them leave. It was the deepest humiliation in Roman history, and Rome used it. The army was reformed, the walls were strengthened. Something harder entered the Roman character after 390 BC, a refusal to ever be that vulnerable again, a hunger for the kind of safety that only total dominance could provide. The Gauls gave Rome the wound that made it dangerous. Over the next 2 centuries, Rome conquered Italy city by city, tribe by tribe, but it did something no conquering power had done before on this scale. It offered the defeated a future. Conquered peoples were made allies, given Roman roads, given Roman law. Their sons could serve in Roman legions and, one day, become Roman citizens. Rome did not just conquer Italy, it made Italy Roman, and then it looked outward, and it saw Carthage. Carthage was the dominant power of the Western Mediterranean, a great Phoenician trading empire based in North Africa, with a navy that owned the sea and colonies across Spain, Sicily, and Sardinia. 3 wars, 118 years, the most brutal sustained conflict the ancient world had ever seen. In the First Punic War, Rome had no navy, none at all, so it built one from scratch, added a boarding bridge called the Corvus that turned sea battles into land battles, and won. In the second, Carthage sent a general named Hannibal Barca, and the world had never seen anything like him. In 218 BC, Hannibal led his army from Spain, across the Pyrenees, through southern France, across the Alps in winter with war elephants, and came down into Italy from the north. Rome never expected an attack from that direction. No one thought crossing the Alps in winter was even possible. At Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, he lured a Roman army of 30,000 into a mountain pass and hit them from 3 sides simultaneously. The battle lasted 3 hours. Most of the Romans never even saw who was killing them. At Cannae in 216 BC, outnumbered on flat ground, he executed a double encirclement so perfect that between 50 and 70,000 Roman soldiers died in a single afternoon. Generals still study that battle today. Rome had lost more men in one day than some nations lose in entire wars. And Rome did not surrender. It refused to negotiate. It raised new armies. It never met Hannibal in open battle again, fighting him through attrition for 15 years. Cutting off his supplies, turning his allies against him one by one. When Hannibal was finally recalled to Africa to defend Carthage itself, the Roman general Scipio Africanus met him at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC and destroyed him. Carthage survived, but only barely, and not for long. The Third Punic War ended in 146 BC, when Rome besieged Carthage, breached its walls after 3 years, fought house to house through the streets for 6 days, and burned it to the ground. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. Then Rome salted the earth. The city that had produced Hannibal was erased from existence. That same year, Rome also destroyed Corinth, the wealthiest city in Greece. A message was being sent to the entire Mediterranean world. There is no negotiating with Rome. There is only Rome. But the wars that built the empire were quietly destroying the republic that had built those wars. Conquest flooded Rome with slaves, hundreds of thousands of them, who worked the great estates of the wealthy and pushed small farmers off their land. The cities filled with landless, restless men. Generals who commanded loyal armies began to realize their soldiers were more loyal to them than to the Senate. The Republic had been built for a city-state. It could not survive an empire. The cracks appeared slowly. Reformers were murdered. Generals marched their armies toward Rome. The constitution was suspended, restored, suspended again. And then 3 men divided the Roman world between them like private property. Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, Marcus Crassus. The man who ended it all was Caesar. He was not simply a general. He was a politician of extraordinary cunning, a writer of exceptional skill. His accounts of the Gallic Wars are still read today, and a man who understood earlier than anyone that Rome had to become something new. His conquest of Gaul between 58 and 50 BC brought an entire territory the size of modern France under Roman control. It made him the most powerful and most popular man in the Roman world. The Senate, terrified, ordered him to disband his army. In January of 49 BC, Caesar stood on the northern bank of the Rubicon River, the boundary beyond which no Roman general was permitted to bring armed troops. He crossed it. Civil war. Pompey fled and was defeated. Caesar returned to Rome as its master. He put his face on coins, the first living Roman to receive that honor. He accepted the title of dictator in perpetuity. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, 23 senators surrounded him in the theater of Pompey and stabbed him to death. They believed they were saving the Republic. They destroyed it. The chaos that followed proved what Caesar had already understood. The Republic could not function anymore. It needed one hand at the top. The man who provided that hand was Caesar's adopted heir, his 18-year-old great-nephew, Octavian. Cold, patient, absolutely ruthless beneath a surface of perfect Republican manners. He destroyed his enemies one by one. Mark Antony and Cleopatra, defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, the last serious challenge to his power. And then he did something Caesar had failed to do. He pretended not to be king. He kept the Senate. He kept the elections. He kept every outward form of the Republic. He simply made sure that every position that actually mattered was his simultaneously. The Senate gave him a new name, Augustus, the revered one, the first emperor of Rome, who never once called himself that. What followed was 2 centuries of peace, the Pax Romana. The empire stretched from Scotland to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara. 50 million people under one administration, one currency, one legal system, connected by 50,000 miles of paved roads, so well constructed that many can still be found beneath the ground today. Rome did not just rule the ancient world, it organized it. The emperors who followed ranged from the brilliant to the catastrophic. Caligula made his horse a consul and was murdered by his own guards after 4 years. Claudius, dismissed as an invalid, turned out to be one of the best administrators Rome ever had and conquered Britain. Nero blamed Christians for burning Rome and launched the first persecution of a faith that would eventually outlive the empire itself. Trajan pushed Roman territory to its greatest extent ever. Marcus Aurelius spent his reign fighting endless wars on the Danube frontier, and his nights writing meditations on virtue and impermanence. He did not know he was writing the eulogy of an age. After Marcus Aurelius, the empire entered what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. 50 years, 26 emperors, most killed violently. Plague swept the empire. The frontiers buckled. The economy collapsed. The empire survived, barely, restored by a line of tough soldier emperors from the Balkans, but it was never the same. In 284 AD, an emperor named Diocletian made a decision that acknowledged what everyone already knew. The empire was too large for one man to govern. He divided it in 2, a western half and an eastern half. He meant it as a solution. It was a farewell. Then came Constantine. In 312 AD, the night before a battle that would decide who controlled the entire empire, Constantine reportedly saw a vision, a cross in the sky, words beside it. In this sign, conquer. He painted the Christian symbol on his soldiers' shields and won. In 313 AD, he legalized Christianity across the entire empire. In 330 AD, he moved the capital east to a new city built on the site of the ancient Greek town of Byzantium, on the strait between Europe and Asia. He called it Constantinople, New Rome. The old Rome had conquered through force. The new Rome would conquer through faith, and it would last another 1,000 years. The western half did not. Through the 4th and 5th centuries, Germanic peoples pushed across the frontiers in waves, some as invaders, some as refugees fleeing the Huns from the east. In 410 AD, the Visigoth king Alaric sacked Rome itself, the first foreign army inside the city in 800 years. The Roman world went into shock. In 476 AD, a chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, named after both the founder of Rome and its first emperor, and sent the imperial regalia east to Constantinople. There was no one left to receive it in the west, but in the east, Rome continued. The Eastern Roman Empire, which historians call Byzantium, though its people called themselves Romans until the very last day, survived for another 1,000 years. Under the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, it reconquered North Africa and Italy. His general Belisarius fought campaigns of breathtaking brilliance with armies a fraction of Rome's old size. But Justinian's most lasting achievement was not military. He commissioned a complete codification of all Roman law, 1,000 years of legal precedent, organized into a single coherent body. That code became the foundation of legal systems across Europe. It is still the basis of law in France, Spain, Italy, and Germany today. Roman law did not die in 476 AD. It is still governing you. Byzantium fought on for centuries more against Arab armies that stripped away Egypt and Syria in a single generation, against the Seljuk Turks, who shattered the Byzantine army at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 and seized Anatolia in a decade. Each blow seemed fatal. Each time, Constantinople held until May 29th, 1453. Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, 21 years old, consumed by the ambition to be the conqueror of Rome, brought an army and cannons the size of which the world had never seen. For 53 days they fired at the Theodosian walls, fortifications so formidable they had never been breached in over 1,000 years. On the 54th day, they broke. The last emperor of Rome, Constantine XI, reportedly removed his imperial regalia, walked into the breach in the walls, and was never seen again. His body was never found. And what did Mehmed II do the moment Constantinople fell? He took the title Caesar-e-Rum, Caesar of Rome. The man who had just destroyed Rome immediately declared himself its heir. Think about that. The Ottoman sultans who followed him considered themselves Rome's successors. The Pope in Rome had been claiming Roman imperial authority for centuries. The Russian Tsars, the word Tsar comes directly from Caesar, declared Moscow the Third Rome. The Holy Roman Empire spent 1,000 years insisting it was Rome reborn. Every power that rose after Rome spent its entire existence trying to prove it was Rome continued, not something new. Rome continued. And today, the roads the Romans built still lie beneath the highways of Britain, France, and Italy. The months of your calendar: January for Janus, March for Mars, Roman. The legal concepts governing property, contracts, and criminal procedure across the Western world: Roman. The Catholic Church, organized as a hierarchy centered in Rome, conducting its rituals in Latin for 15 centuries, the direct institutional heir of the empire itself. The very idea that a state should be governed by written law rather than a single ruler's will. Roman. Rome did not fall. Rome dissolved into everything, into the language you speak, the laws you live under, the calendar you follow, the very way you think about what civilization is and what it owes the people inside it. Every conqueror who ever entered Roman territory ended up becoming Roman. Every empire that rose after Rome ended up defining itself as Rome. No city in history has ever died like that, because Rome never truly died at all. Thank you for watching to the end.